Imagine standing at the edge of a major technological shift where the rules of the MacBook lineup are being rewritten before our eyes. For years, we've looked at the MacBook Air as the entry point, but Apple just dropped a bombshell that changes everything. The new MacBook Neo has arrived, and it's not just another laptop, it's the beginning of a whole new era for the Mac. But is this budget machine actually a powerhouse in disguise, or are you about to make a massive mistake? If you've been holding on to an M1 or M2, or you're eyeing the brand new M5, there is a very specific reason why the Neo might, or might not, be the right choice for you. Apple has officially divided the Mac world into three distinct tiers: the efficiency tier for the masses, the performance tier for the creators, and the pro tier for the hardcore engineers. The Neo sits right at the bottom, but the benchmarks tell a story that absolutely shocked me. Let's talk about the unboxing first. In a world where premium tech often feels cold, the Neo arrives in a box that screams personality, especially in that citrus color. But for those of you in Europe and the UK, be warned, Apple is taking the iPhone approach here. You won't find a charger in the box. It's a bold move for a laptop, but it's all part of the strategy to hit that aggressive $500 price point. Now, let's get into the meat of the performance. Usually, when you buy a baseline machine, you expect it to be slow. We ran the Blackmagic disk speed test, and while the M5 is obviously miles ahead, the Neo holds its own with read speeds of over 1500 megabytes per second. It's not a speed demon, but for an education-focused machine, it's remarkably solid. But the real shocker? Geekbench 6. The MacBook Neo, powered by the A18 Pro chip, yes, the same silicon inside the iPhone 16 Pro, is putting up single-core scores that are neck and neck with the M4. It's faster than the M1, M2, and even the M3 in single-core tasks. In multi-core, it's landing right in the middle of M1 and M2 territory. This is a $500 machine outperforming flagships from just a couple of years ago. And for the gamers out there, you need to hear this. We tested Cyberpunk 2077 at 1080p medium settings. On a baseline Neo, we saw over 36 frames per second. But when we flipped on FSR 3.1 frame generation, it skyrocketed to 57 frames per second. That is faster than an M5 running natively. Apple has managed to squeeze console-level gaming potential into their most affordable laptop ever. However, there is one area where you need to be very careful: rendering. If you're a 3D artist using Blender, the Neo will show its limits. With only 5 GPU cores compared to the 10 cores in the Air or Pro, it's significantly slower in heavy renders. But for 90% of people who are just browsing, coding, and light video editing, the Neo isn't just enough, it's incredible. The biggest surprise, though, was the heat. We put the Neo and the M5 MacBook Air under a 10-minute Cinebench stress test. While the internal sensors showed the Neo running slightly warmer, the thermal camera revealed a different reality. The M5 Air hit 50 degrees Celsius on the chassis, while the Neo stayed at a cool 36 degrees. Because the Neo has fewer cores to feed, it stays significantly cooler under pressure. It's the ultimate machine for someone who wants a laptop that stays silent and comfortable on their lap all day. Apple is betting that 75% of you don't need a Pro or even an Air. They've built a machine that is powerful enough for the masses at a price that feels like a steal. So, before you drop $2,000 on a Pro that you'll never fully utilize, look at the Neo. The results might just change your mind. The MacBook landscape has shifted, and the budget option is no longer a compromise. It's a revolution. Stop overpaying for power you don't use and start looking at the efficiency king. Right now, something strange is happening in Apple's MacBook lineup, and most people haven't noticed it yet. For years, buying a MacBook was simple. If you wanted something affordable, you bought the MacBook Air. If you wanted serious power, you went for the MacBook Pro. Easy decision. But now Apple has quietly introduced something new, something unexpected, the MacBook Neo. And suddenly, the entire MacBook lineup looks very different. The real question is, where does the MacBook Neo actually fit? And more importantly, is it powerful enough to replace the MacBook Air that millions of people already use? Because on paper, the results might actually surprise you. At first glance, the MacBook Neo looks exactly like what you would expect from Apple. Clean design, minimal look, thin profile, and that familiar MacBook feel that Apple fans love. But here's the twist. The Neo is not designed to beat the MacBook Air. It's designed to sit below it. Apple has quietly created 3 performance levels for MacBooks. At the top, you have the MacBook Pro machines. These are built for serious workloads like video editing, 3D rendering, programming, and professional creative work. In the middle sits the MacBook Air. Powerful, lightweight, and capable of handling most modern tasks like editing photos, coding, and multitasking. And then at the bottom, now sits the MacBook Neo. This is Apple's new entry point. The most affordable MacBook you can buy. But don't let that fool you. Because when you look closer at the numbers, this entry-level machine starts doing some surprisingly impressive things. Before even talking about performance, let's start with the first experience people always care about, the unboxing. Opening the MacBook Neo feels exactly like opening any Apple product. The box is simple, clean, and perfectly designed. Apple always focuses on that first moment when you lift the lid. Inside, the MacBook sits neatly wrapped, waiting for its first power on. And the design instantly feels familiar. Thin aluminum body. Minimal keyboard layout. Large trackpad. Everything looks premium, even though this is technically Apple's cheapest MacBook. Once powered on, the display lights up with that classic Apple welcome screen. And right away, it becomes clear that Apple didn't cut corners where it matters most. But the real question everyone wants answered is simple. How fast is it? Because a cheaper MacBook only makes sense if it can actually keep up with everyday tasks. So let's start with storage speed. The MacBook Neo delivers read speeds of about 1,581 megabytes per second and write speeds of around 1,369 megabytes per second. Now if you compare that to higher-end MacBooks, those numbers are obviously slower. Machines like the MacBook Air M4 or M5 easily push much faster speeds. But here's the important detail. For a laptop that costs around $500 to $600, these speeds are actually very respectable. For everyday users browsing the web, working in documents, watching videos, or managing files, this level of storage performance feels fast and responsive. And that's exactly who Apple designed this machine for. But storage speed is only part of the story. The real test is CPU performance. Inside the MacBook Neo sits the A18 Pro chip. And if that name sounds familiar, it should. Because this chip was originally designed for the iPhone. So naturally, many people wondered whether a smartphone chip could actually power a full laptop. The benchmark results gave us the answer. In Geekbench single-core performance, the MacBook Neo scored around 3,363. And that number is surprisingly close to the performance of the much newer M4 chip in certain tasks. Even more impressive, it actually beats the older M1, M2, and M3 chips in single-core performance. That means everyday actions like opening apps, loading web pages, and basic productivity tasks feel incredibly quick. But what about multi-core performance? That's where things become a bit more balanced. The MacBook Neo scored around 9,142 in multi-core testing. That puts it comfortably ahead of the original M1 chip and approaching M2 territory. So while it's not trying to compete with newer MacBook Air models, it still delivers plenty of power for most users. And that's the key idea behind the Neo. Apple didn't try to build the fastest MacBook. They tried to build the smartest MacBook for everyday users. And in many ways, they succeeded. But CPU power alone doesn't tell the whole story. Modern laptops also rely heavily on GPU performance. Especially when it comes to creative apps, graphics work, and even gaming. So how does the Neo perform there? In Geekbench Metal GPU testing, the Neo scored around 30,000 points. That places it almost neck and neck with the original M1 MacBook. Again, it's not beating newer chips like M2, M3, or M4. but it's still delivering performance strong enough for light graphics, arcade, casual gaming, and creative apps. And then came the test that surprised everyone. Gaming. Cyberpunk 2077 was tested on the MacBook Neo at 1080p with medium settings. The result? About 36 frames per second. That might not sound incredible at first, but when you compare it to older MacBooks, it actually performs better than the M3 in this specific scenario. And when frame generation technology was enabled, the Neo jumped all the way to 57 frames per second. For a budget MacBook, that's extremely impressive. It proves that even though the Neo is designed as an entry-level machine, it still has enough power to handle some surprisingly demanding tasks. But raw performance numbers only tell part of the story. What really matters is how a laptop performs in real-world creative work. So the next test involved rendering in Blender. Here, the Neo did fall behind the more powerful M-series chips. That's mainly because it only has 5 GPU cores, while other MacBooks have significantly more. But again, that result makes sense. The Neo wasn't designed for heavy 3D rendering. It was designed for everyday productivity. And in those tasks, it performs extremely well.